Okay, so I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out what kind of angle from this I'm coming from because on Monday I'm going to go see 1917. I'm actually really excited about that because when the preview for it came out, it looked like it was going to be really good. And it reminded me it reminded me of They Shall Never Grow Old, which of course is the documentary done by Peter Jackson, of which I finally saw that and I just loved it. So I'm even more excited about 1917. And, you know, like when you see the brutality of the conditions of World War I, like when you see them in the trenches, when you see, just like the soldiers, when you hear their stories, it just like it changes something inside of you. And it reminds me also of there's a project, and at this point I forget the project, but I heard about it on the Glenn Beck podcast, which I don't watch too much, but he was interviewing this young 20 something year old who was going around and he was interviewing World War II veterans because he just realized that, like he felt like their stories needed to be told. He felt like he didn't want them to be forgotten. And so it became a passion project, and it just allowed him to just go not only around the country, but just around the world as more and more people were like, hey, we have a World War II vet over here that you can interview. And just, like being able to as many as possible before they pass, and just talking to them about their experiences and just not forgetting, because the problem that we're having, especially nowadays, is we are forgetting. And we're forgetting because we've allowed identity politics, and we've allowed people like this Sophia Benoit to tell us that we shouldn't focus on those kind of events. And so I tried to do this video before, but I realized it was the same kind of like upset, I'm tired of them telling us what to do thing. But like the more I think about it, the more it just occurs to me of how much the problem is, like, and the problem because the problem is that they don't want to live in reality. And they don't want to live in reality. They don't want to live in a world that acknowledges the fact that black people are only 13% of the population. They don't want to live in a world where, you know, where illegal immigrants are not just all hardworking people. They don't want to live in a world where they have to acknowledge that history was very messy and that a lot of both good and bad things came out of it. It's like they want this, they've created this protective bubble for themselves. And that's literally all that they've done, is they've created a protective bubble around themselves. And they tell the world, if the events don't fit into this bubble that I'm creating, then it needs to go away. And that's a very dangerous game to play. It's a very dangerous game, because when we don't learn from our past, like when we don't learn from past mistakes, we're doomed to repeat it. And the way that these people are operating, they are doomed to repeat the same mistakes, because the language that they use is incredibly dangerous. And it's like I've always seen it. You say something I don't like. That's not just you saying something. That's now you enacting violence against me. So I'm going to respond to your non-aggression with aggression. I'm going to change the world because now I've picked an enemy. Think of the Yazidis. Think of Mussolini. Think of Pol Pot. Think of any dictator. What are the things that they do? They find an enemy and they overblow that enemy and they go after that enemy. And then once that enemy is defeated, what do? They find another enemy, because the fight never, ever, ever ends. This woman, you're saying this because you don't want the story to be told, because you don't want to deal with reality. And you don't want to deal with reality which says people are interested in the historical aspect of World War I, World War II. People are interested in good storytelling, because we are. What people are not interested in is virtue signaling. What we're not interested in is forced diversity. Certainly, I'm not interested in forced diversity. I saw the title of an article. I didn't click on it to see it because, as much as I liked the Flash comic, I'm not super knowledgeable about it. But it basically was saying, oh, they're thinking about gender swapping Reverse Flash, which I think would be a terrible, terrible idea if there's no reason to do it. And that becomes the thing, they want you, and and I'm saying these people, but this type of people, they're not interested in quality. They're not interested in good storytelling. They're not interested in things that entertain people. I know Diversity in Comics or Comics Matter with your boy Zach did a video, where he talked about they just want influence. They don't want to be successful. They just want influence. And it is, the more you see it, because it's a matter of they don't want to make the kind of movies that they want to see. They don't want to see the type of movies they say they want to see. They're not interested in that, because because Sophia Benoist, makes the claim that, well, there are female stories that could and should be told, ignoring the fact that recently we've had female stories being told. They just happen to be flops. But they're getting made. But that's the point. They're being made. And instead of promoting those, because, if you really were interested in female-made movies, I would think you would spend your time more focusing on promoting the good ones. The reality is, there's not many good ones. And the reason for that, because it's my same feeling is with Black movies. There aren't many good ones. Why? Because it's agenda. The focus is not on storytelling. The focus is on the agenda. It's focused on making you feel a certain way. It's focused on is focused on influence and influencing. You know, when black movies keep being about the past, when it keeps being about the Jim Crow era, when it keeps being about slavery, that's telling black people you can never get ahead. You know, that's the influence it keeps saying. Be angry because the system is keeping you down. The white system is keeping you down. And that's all that these movies do. And they just breed more and more anger. And then black people don't go anywhere, which is exactly what these progressives want. And you'll never convince me that they don't want anything different. Because when you go back and you look at the historical roots of progressivism, yeah, there was a lot of racism in there. A whole lot of racism in there. And so even in things like this, it's the matter of influencing, because we don't want you to have good stories. We don't want you to have hobbies that you enjoy. We don't want you to be able to, we don't want you to be able to have a moment where you can relax. You must be lectured to at every moment of every hour of every day. If they had their way, it would be a constant lecture. They would be putting people in camps to, enforce their training. I mean, technically they have, because there are a lot of public schools. And, I was a substitute teacher, and looking at a lot of the things that they wanted to push and things like that. Yeah, no, not appropriate, not even reality based. I keep saying that I hope that 2020 is a new year, and because it's more that because I want 2020 to be a year that people start paying attention, that that people who have been silent, people who have maybe noticed things but have never really said anything, like, I think this needs to be the year that those sorts of people begin speaking. It's why I am kind of doing this, because I don't necessarily want to focus on the drama of it, because here's the thing: you're never going to change a far left individual's mind. You're not going to, because they've created the world that they want to live in, and that world is full of misery, and they're not interested in even thinking of things being different. You can't change that, but what you can do is you can begin to look at the regular everyday person who maybe is busy at work, so they don't necessarily pay attention, who, is kind of like running around in their life. And maybe they notice kind of things, but they just kind of think, oh, well, it's just, maybe it's just the internet. And it doesn't influence my everyday life. And what we need to understand is it influences our regular everyday life, because this this insidious message, because Hollywood is full of leftists, and that's the thing, but it isn't left enough. Leftists have flooded the gaming industry. They've flooded the comics industry. They're flooding now. They're trying to flood the sports industry. Their model is to literally create misery everywhere that they go. And, I personally think that more movies like 1917 need to be made. I think great stories need to be told. I've said before, if it's a good movie and if it's a good story, I don't care who's playing the role. If you can convince me that a female playing Reverse Flash, if you can convince me that that's natural, and that, a natural being, it would have to be a great enough backstory. Now, personally, you're not going to convince me, because I've read the comics. Like, I don't like taking male characters and turning them females, just like I didn't like taking established white characters and turning them black, because give us our own. Like, you know, and that's really like that's the thing that bothers me a lot. It's this, in their world they have no creativity because everything is misery, everything is about agenda, everything is about influence, everything is about pushing a particular narrative. So there's never any breaking from those limits. There's never any exploration. There's never any reimagining things. There's never any creativity. And as someone who, prizes creativity, I hate, I hate this thing that I'm seeing where everything is about virtue signal more, because the more you virtue signal, the less creative you're going to be. Why? Because everything is going to be about that narrative. You're going to, seeing it in comics where I don't like seeing black women in comics now, because inevitably you turn them into terrible characters. There's no personality. There's, like, it does make me think of Diversity in Comics video, because it's almost like you are pushing eugenics, but it is because that literally was the point of Margaret Sanger. She was a eugenicist. Like, Germany learned that from her. That's a fact. Germany learned eugenics from her. And she very much wanted to end the black community. So it's like the same, and I say this all the time, the same spirit that goes into things are the same spirit that comes out of it. And the fruit that is being born of this high progressive movement is very ugly and very rotten, and it lacks creativity, and it lacks, reality, and it's not going to be a pretty picture if people keep trying, and especially if corporations keep trying to eat of that tree. There's not going to be, like, the fruit that's going to come out of that is going to be extremely rotten. And I mean, you can see it now. Like, you can see it in the comics book industry. You can see it even in, the backlash of movies. You can see it in these places, because the worst that, because it is sort of like things get worse before they get better. Like, I have hope. I do, like, I always do have hope, because I feel like we're in an age with the internet, where the internet gives us a chance and opportunity to be able to grow, because you can grow not only your voice, but you can also reach an audience and demographic that is needed. That's why I think it was so important at the beginning when Jawbreaker Lost Souls hit Indiegogo, because it allowed other creators to, begin to dream outside of the established industry. And so now, okay, we have a lot of projects flooding Indiegogo, but, I guess we're sort of at the point where it's like, okay, so then what's next? Because, what's going to be building, like, because it is building something that is more sustainable, but that's not the topic or purpose of this industry. It really is sort of like, where is the dreaming? Where is the creativity? Where is the imagining? Where's the imagination? Where are the limits that are being pushed? Where where has that gone? Where are the people, where are the people who are willing to push those limits and are willing, to move things in a different direction and are willing to stand up and say, hey, I just want to tell a really good story. One of the things that fascinated me was the rise of Issa Rae, where, she started small on YouTube and just putting up little skits and things like that, and then was able to grow herself into a brand. Like those are the kind of stories that need to be highlighted. She didn't sit back and wait for someone to give it to her. She fought for it. And there are other stories like that. So I guess for me, like I look at this kind of tweet, and I've read through her previous, like the rest of the tweets and whatnot, and it's the same thing. It's that idea of, they're looking to influence. They're basically just saying, pat women and pat minorities on the head and give them handouts and, stop making quality things and focus on agenda, focus on, influencing people's opinions, focus on the things that we want you to focus on. And, and even then they still won't be happy, because I don't believe that they're ever going to be happy. But I know that is that thing, it's the don't give people the quality that they're looking for. Don't give them, don't make great movies that draws them in. Because here's the thing. I saw the trailer for 1917. I didn't care that it was all white people, because the story just looked amazing. I saw They Shall Never Grow Old. I didn't care that it was just like, They Shall Never Grow Old was basically about England and the war. I didn't care that I didn't really see any others. Like, it was between England and Germany. That literally was it. And it didn't bother me that I didn't see a bunch of female faces and that I didn't see a bunch of minority faces, because you know what? It was fascinating all on its own. So I don't believe for a moment that Sophia Benoit even believes her own message. I just think she's used to saying it because she herself would not see these movies. Otherwise, she would be talking about the Charlie's Angels. She would be talking about Little Women. She would be talking about all those female movies and female stories. But she's not talking about that. And those things exist. And I'm pretty sure she knows that they exist. Because it isn't about that. It's about pushing the narrative. And of course, I, for one, am deeply, 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 deeply tired of them pushing that narrative. And like, I know that in order for things to get better, that just basically means more and more regular people and more regular creative-minded people have to wake up and begin pushing for things themselves and have to be willing to take a chance. And, like, I really kind of hope that does happen soon, because, it's 2020, it's a new decade, and like, things need to change. And we can't just say 2015 is over, finally, if we don't have something to replace 2015 with. So for me, because I'm challenging myself with that, like, what is this new 2020 going to bring? What is this new decade going to bring? What is going to be my pushback against, identity politics and narrative-based storytelling? Like, what am I going to do to, what am I going to focus on for 2020? And the answer is, of course, I'm going to focus on my stories. But anyway, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, the bell for notifications, share, do all of that. And I will see you on the next video. Bye.